Shalom, and welcome to our 8:30 p.m. broadcast Wednesday evenings. Rabbi Gaines here with Da'ati. Thank you again for your attendance. Thank you again for being part of our live broadcast. Tonight's question comes from Howard. Howard asks, and he wrote a beautiful question, and it has many layers to it, but the basic meaning of the question was this. He says, I understand that you, as a rabbi, part of the Jewish people, that you don't yet have a Messiah who's arrived. You don't subscribe to the messianic identity of Jesus like the Christians do. So he asked a very logical question. So what proof do you need? What would be for you, Rabbi Gaines, in your eyes, messianic proof? Who would you trust? What qualifications would somebody need to go ahead and meet in order that you could say messianic, Mashiach, Messiah identity? What would that be? So obviously, this is a question that requires a great amount of elaboration and detail orientation. But let's keep it very general. What does the Messiah have to do in order to make this messianic reality come into fruition? So according to the biblical law, there are two aspects that have to occur. One, there has to be the internal qualifications, called in Hebrew yichus, meaning bloodline, and also a certain amount of knowledge that gives the person the ability to be that person, not just to have a certain lineage, but also to have a certain amount of Torah knowledge. The second part deals more with the changes that will occur in the world as a result of the individual actualizing his potential. So let's talk about the first two. Number one, as many of you already know, he has to be a descendant, a blood descendant of King David. King David, the monarch, who we say in Hebrew, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. David, king of Israel, will live forever, meaning his monarchy, his line, will endure forever. King David's line represents the messianic future kingdom that will become the foundation of the Messiah's reality. So, the individual who may be the Messiah has to have, number one, the bloodline of King David. However, if you look deeper into this, there's been many people throughout history who have the bloodline of King David. So that's not exactly a difficult qualification. If you're from the right family, you will possess the right bloodline. The second part of number one is a bit harder. Having mastery of Torah knowledge, having the academics and the mechanics of the biblical wisdom at your fingertips, not to the point of being an expert, to the point of consummate mastery, where all of its principles, all of its details are internalized and even more importantly, lived by. So that's more rare now. Obviously, there's been many people since the days of King David who possess the qualification of King David, but to have the embodiment of Torah, to be the one who possesses the whole of biblical wisdom, that's a much harder qualification. But there have been people that have possessed those two qualifications. Number two, much more difficult. The revelation and actualization of those messianic potentials, meaning how it affects the world. So what does that mean practically? We're taught that when the Messiah arrives, he has to do a couple of things. Number one, as the initial qualification, there has to be what's called an ingathering, kibbutz hagaliot, that all of the tribes who've been lost through the millenniums of exile, destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, destruction of the second temple by the Romans, the dispersion of the people across the world, that has to be rectified by bringing the people back. And that means practically the majority of the Jewish population, at the hand of the Messiah's influence, has to end up back in the land of Israel. One of the most important rabbis, rabbinical figures of Jewish history, the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides, said, when the majority of the Jewish people return back to their land, we tip the population scale, then Ruach HaKodesh, prophecy, will return back to the people. So that has not been fulfilled. There are about 6 million Jews today in the land of Israel. There's millions and more outside of Israel. But the collective have not yet in the majority found their way back into the land. Number two, the Mashiach, the Messiah, must go ahead and build the temple, the third temple. That will become the spiritual merkaz, the spiritual center that will bring all the nations of the world, similar to the days of King Solomon, back into the land with gifts and all types of connection, but that center, that messianic center of the temple's reestablishment is again a concept that has not yet been fulfilled. After that, we get into much more global effects. Our sages tell us that when the Messiah comes and establishes his kingdom in the land of Israel, Israel will spread out to encompass the whole globe, meaning the meaning of Israel, what it means to be Yisrael, will encompass everything. Practically, that means that all of the governments and institutions, colleges, etc., educational bodies, will restructure their program to teach about God, meaning God will become the center focus. That becomes the... So imagine, for example, in college, you take a course. The course would be the same, but the focus of the course now would be the godliness underlying that subject matter. That's again a concept that, though it is certainly starting in the world, more of a godly awareness in the sciences, etc., is not yet consummate. We don't yet have a completely integrated Torah educational system. That's also part of the Messianic prophecy. Next, we have the idea of a change of nature itself. The Amalek, the loathsome evil in the heart of man, in the deepest recess of what's called the left ventricle of the heart, the evil within will be ripped out. All of it will be eradicated. Our sages say, once a person goes ahead and loses the evil within, there'll be a broadcast to the outside, changing forever the laws of nature itself. Hence the prophecy, the wolf will lie down with the lamb. There will no longer be an antipathy between predator and prey. The change within precipitates the change without. That has not occurred even in the least bit. We all still struggle with our nature. The nature of the world is still predator and prey, strong and weak, etc. So all of these things represent stages in the messianic process. The last of which, of course, is the complete spiritual revitalization of the world, the resurrection of the dead, a change of nature to such a degree that even dimensions break open, and now we're talking about heaven and earth existing on the same plane. So those are the basic qualifications that, from a Jewish perspective, give one an active messianic identity. So again, to sum up, bloodline is important, Torah knowledge more so, but then the next steps, ingathering, building the temple, changing the curriculums, the educational format of the world, eradication of evil within, change of nature without, unification of heavens and earth, all of these are essential stages in order from a Jewish perspective to realize a messianic identity. So I hope that, Howard, to a certain degree answers your question. If one does come along who can do all of that and reveal those required steps in the messianic becoming, we are more than happy to identify him as the righteous Mashiach, the anointed one, the King of Israel, the King of the world, who will bring a deeper relationship between God and the people. Be blessed. Have a wonderful week. I look forward to seeing you again next week, 8:30 p.m., live broadcast with your questions. Take care, and we'll see you again next time.